thank you for for coming to our very first Fireside Chat, brought to you by Research and Innovation Center and our Title III grant. And so this will be the first, and this will be the first of a series of Fireside Chats that will dive deeper into research, innovation, higher education, what's changing in technology, data, human literacies, and we're just gonna keep this going till we solve some problems and collaborate more and enhance our student experience here at Tomball College, Lone Star College. And so we're super happy to get it started. If you have not yet been up to East 253 to our new Research and Innovation Center, please do. Isabel Chen, our coordinator for Research and Innovation, is here. She did a fantastic job decorating the place. She has programming set up, and it's very, very comfortable up there. You will love to be in there and do some research and talk about innovation. There's even opportunity for you to reserve the space. But I want to introduce to you our moderator today. You all know him. We all know him very well, and I know he's going to give some context on why we're doing the Fireside Chat and the book that inspired the Research and Innovation Center, and why we're focusing on three particular literacies today. And so I'm going to just go ahead and let him, because he's really good about giving context. That's like one of his favorite things. He likes to give context. And so our moderator today is Dr. Jackie Thomas. He's our chief strategist here, and he is I couldn't think of a better person to do this. And so I'm going to let him introduce his panel and the context behind this Fireside Chat. So thanks again, everyone. Dr. Thomas.
I'm going to speak very briefly because I want to give the panel a chance to introduce themselves and get right into the questions. So Robot Proof is a book that I stumbled upon and started to read, and immediately thought about the work that we've been doing at Lone Star College-Tomball, particularly around research and innovation, and allowed it to really become the framework for the Research and Innovation Center. So I won't spoil all of the amazing things that are in the book, but I would definitely encourage you to pick up a copy. I don't know if we've got a few in the Research and Innovation Center, but today's Fireside Chat is really based on the three literacies that you see in your handout. Did everybody get a copy of the handout? All right, so the book talks about a set of capacities and literacies. Today we're going to focus on technological, data, and human literacy, and what better folks to have here than our amazing panelists. So I'm going to give them a chance to introduce themselves, and then I'm going to hop right in and ask some questions. Feel free to raise your hand, interject. There are a couple questions that I think will be really fun to get the audience's engagement with, but without further ado, we'll start with Kawan. Please introduce yourself, and then we'll get it going.
Good afternoon. My name is Kawan Jaramillo, and I'm the Analytics and Institutional Research Analyst, here at the Tomball campus.
Hi, everyone. My name is Janie Foloteo, and I am a professor of sociology here at LSC-Tomball.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lloyd Hewen, and I am here from the Harris County Public Library. I run the Innovation Lab here at the Tomball campus. So great to be here. Thank you.
Nice. All right, so I'm going to jump right in, and panelists, feel free to pick and choose which questions you want to respond to. You can respond to all of them, or you can defer to your colleagues. But the first one that I will start with is, actually, and I'll give each of you a chance to respond. How has technology, data, and or human behavior evolved over the past 10 years?
I'm going to take this one. I'm going to jump in on this one. I think it's evolved. I'm going to talk to human behavior and data and technology. It's involved in such a way that it's just made us incredibly impatient people. I remember there was a time where you had to get the pager, you got the beep on your pager, you had to then find a phone. The person who paged you had to patiently wait until you responded to the page. And now I find that because you can see the dots when you text somebody, so you know they read it. And you're like, but why haven't you responded? And I know where you are. Like, I know we're impatient.
Just jumping on that too, yeah. Evolution in general has been massive. I mean, if you think about it, I was exiting high school when the first, what we consider true smartphone came out. It was 2007, the iPhone hit. And I was sitting back thinking about it, and I was like, we used to use, phones for internet and email and stuff, but it has evolved much more to where this is a lot of people's only interaction with a lot of tech today. And it's become quite crazy how big it's become. Now having that computer in your pocket is massive, massive. On top of that, just the experiences that we talked about, in sci-fi of the past has now become something that we have today. Virtual reality has expanded immensely. As someone who enjoys virtual reality, like the ability to actually have haptic feedback and feel what's actually not there through that resistance is pretty crazy. So it's just amazing to see how far it's come and how far it's going to go.
I'm going to chime in really quickly. When you said sci-fi, and I thought about films, I remember. I'm so excited to say this. I'm going to date myself, right? As I remember watching the Dick Tracy movie and watching him talking to his watch and thinking that was the most fascinating thing ever, to now be in a place where we can talk into our watch, right? Like, common, right? Dr. Filateo.
So I was just going to add that I think the biggest thing is that, to echo what everyone is saying, one of the norms that I don't like that has changed. So one of our behaviors now that we have, which we need to stop, y'all. I'm on a one-woman crusade to stop it, is we just got out of COVID, where lots of us were on phone calls and Zooms and WebExes. And so we've always, now that we have our phones attached, we've always done the okay, I'm going to call while I'm driving home, right? We're not good multitaskers, but we think we are. But now what we've done is we've upped it post-COVID, because we're still doing virtual meetings. So now we're trying to do Zoom and WebEx and Google Meets while we're driving. It's not okay. And so that's just a reflection of now we're so busy that we can't even drive and take that time on our drive because we have to be doing something. And that's a big stressful change for, I think, all of us.
You mentioned COVID. Talk a little bit about how, in addition to what you shared, how do you all think that COVID has changed people?
I'm going to say that it depends on who we're talking about, because I think that's one of the things that we don't yet fully know, is how different pockets of us have changed so differently. And so that's one thing I will say. I will say for me personally, I think, I've made the joke that I've gone feral during COVID. And what I mean by that is that pre-COVID, there was a lot of pretense and there was a lot of stuff that felt very important. Post-COVID, a lot of it just doesn't seem quite as important in the same way. So I no longer have the capacity that I did pre-COVID to no. I know there's politics here, but I just need you to tell me, because I can't navigate all that. I just need to get to the heart of what's important. I think for a lot of us who were in a position of privilege, we also got to focus on what is important, but especially who is important. Because who the people were in our circles that we made the efforts to make sure made it to the all right, I'm taking a risk to hang out with you or be with you. And I don't know that we're going to fully see the impacts of that or the ripple effects for a little bit longer.
I will say that I think people have realized via COVID that they have options that they didn't have before. I know that they can now appreciate flexibility in a way that they didn't appreciate it before. People are choosing to live in their vans and they are not homeless. It's a whole van life situation out there where people are like, I don't need an address. I'm just going to live in my van. I'm going to fix it up. I'm going to put a restroom in the back and I'm going to do the absolute most. It's really changed the way that people are viewing their flexibility and the things that they want to do. I know that, my daughter called me earlier and she says, Mom, so I got put on a case, but it's because my coworker said, I'm quitting. I'm gonna go travel the world for a year, and if there's an option for me to come back, then I'll do that. So I think especially millennials, they've just realized there's flexibility and there's options, and they are determined to live life on their terms. No longer are they loyal to a job. What is that? They're doing things the way that they want to do it, and they're writing their own tickets.
Echoing some of the stuff that was talked about here. In general, with the advent of COVID, we saw a lot of move to a digital space for work, right? Onboarding, getting people into that environment and having to train up those who have never used it before or weren't quite using it before. It's not going away. So we have to make sure that people are aware of it, despite, there's still places where you want to be in person. As you mentioned, finding out who is, going to be in your circles. A lot of my meetups were done over the internet with my friends. That's how we communicated for a long time. But it's been a really interesting sort of thing to see people latch onto this for the first time, and this massive growth during that. Webcams were sold out like crazy. If anyone remembers that, trying to get a webcam during COVID. It was like black market selling. You can make so much money off of like a simple 1080p webcam. It was crazy.
Or swimming pools, blow-up pools. Anybody try to get a blow-up pool, a swing set?
But it opened doors. It opened doors to how people could work and have that work-life balance. Like, being able to set your own hours in some cases was really great. No longer did you have to be at the office by a certain time. You could roll out of bed, log in at the time, or even be in your pajamas, which was personally amazing for that short amount of time that I was doing it.
So let's jump to the past a little bit. I want each of you to share what's one piece of emerging technology that was a game changer when you were in college.
There was technology when we were in college.
I've got one for sure, but save mine for the end.
The online learning system was really critical when I was going to school. I tried community college outside of when I graduated, and it just didn't work for a number of reasons. I was doing the absolute most. But so I had 3 young daughters, and I found myself needing to go back to school. So on Sundays, we would go to church. We would have dinner. We would go to Barnes and Nobles. My girls would pick out a book or a movie. We would go home and all pile into the bed. They would be watching the movie or reading their books, and I would be online doing my schoolwork. When it came time for me to graduate, this is like 4 years later, they were completely surprised. You're graduating? Yes, I've been going to college this entire time. It allowed me to be a professional. It allowed me to be a mom and not take any time away. I would not have been able to do it in the way that I was if the online learning system wasn't available.
Well said.
Well, Dr. Thomas said he was going to age himself earlier. But let me age myself here. So the biggest thing, and some of y'all are young enough that y'all gonna be like, what? I remember when I was resistant to getting an email. Now, to be fair, I'm still resistant to email, but I am solidly Gen Xer. So the only thing scarier than an email is a phone call. So I remember getting like the issued from the college saying like this was your username. And I remember then like in my later years of college of like, oh, now I need to get like an email. Hotmail for the win, still have it.
Yes.
And I'm proud of it. So email was the thing that was the big thing towards the end of my college career.
All right. Online learning, email.
I'm going to reference the online learning again because before with, college by correspondence, it was a really great thing to be able to do it from home or wherever you were doing it. The internet has made that so much easier. And then further on, as we got into more throughput, more bandwidth, faster internet connections, now you have the ability to real-time talk or watch something go live. Someone's either streaming a class in session or doing some sort of talk, maybe a demonstration. the tools, the internet in general has just made it so that the information has become literally at your fingertips. But that also means that we have to determine what information is the information we need, which data is another thing. Parsing your data, understanding what you're looking for and what is going to be helpful and relevant to you. Like, it's crazy. But the internet at large has been the big thing. When I was in elementary school, we had computer classes, right? And it would be like simple things. You're learning how to use a keyboard, mouse, but there was early internet. It was like wild, wild west, you know. No securities, nothing. Now it's a much different landscape, and that's been 20 years or so. It's amazing. But yes, internet and online learning has been the biggest difference that I've seen through college.
I feel like mine's not going to be as serious now, but that is my role as a moderator. So I was going to say, for me, the game changer was Napster. You're with me, right? So I remember in LimeWire, I remember being in college and getting up in the morning, loading up 25 or 30 different songs that I wanted to download, coming back from class, and them all being downloaded and ready to listen to. And it just was, that then allowed me to make CDs that I could then make make money or play. But nonetheless, I just remember everybody downloading music, and it is very different. I mean, very, very different now in terms of how you access music.
Thanks, Metallica, for that. Yeah.
Right. Thanks, Metallica. All right. So, what's a wave or a trend that you all believe we need to jump on in higher education?
So okay. So one I'm going to say is a trend, but then one is a thing that I don't know that it qualifies as either a trend or a wave. So let me be the faculty that member that I am and change the question. So that
Fair enough.
the trend or the wave, I do think that there's something to be said for like our current social media and the way that we use spaces, and I don't think that we are tapping into some potential that is there. People smarter than me will have to figure out under what conditions and under what formats and all that good stuff. I'm looking at Cassie. She's someone y'all can tap into. But as far as this is where I'm gonna change the question because it's not the question you asked. But I've been saying for some time now that the thing that I think that we need to capture, especially at the community college level, is we need to capture our Hispanic, Latino, Latinx, Latina, whichever label everyone prefers, families, because those are the folks that we need to capture at a very young and early age, making college accessible, making college a safe space, making college a place that, oh yes, I belong there too. And I think in doing so, that's going to open up the doors for these other minoritized and marginalized groups. But I think if you take a look at demography and at my understanding of demography and where our population growth is coming from, we need to tap them now, even though that payoff isn't going to come for some time, and capturing the whole family, not just our traditional college age or dual credit, but the whole family.
Thank you.
I'm going to say we need to replace lectures with active learning. I think it's important so that we have the opportunity to close the gap on those socioeconomically disadvantaged students. So we make learning, you walk away with, you're able to walk away really understanding the concepts because you were actively engaged in the learning process. I remember when I was in college, you just kind of piled into a classroom, a lecture hall much larger than this, and you just got a seat and you took notes, or someone passed you their notes from the day before. But we really have to change the way that we're sharing this information with our students.
Sort of going off of that, the critical thinking ability of students, pushing that boundary and making them think about the content that they're working with. And beyond that is also ensuring that the curriculums that are being offered are those that are going to be part of the emerging job market in the future, always looking forward for what's coming next. You know, years and years ago, programmers weren't really that needed. I'm saying a long time ago, not more recently. Even going as far back as like the tutor era, you all had skills. You had a skill. You worked on something that was a job that you looked forward to. Those are not really needed today as much. We don't need someone to actually thresh the wheat. We have a machine that does that for us. You know, so looking for where these new emerging jobs can be as we approach an era in which AI is becoming much more common. It's going to be integrated in a lot more things. The cloud or the internet is ever expanding. We have this whole world of things that is being turned on. Everything has an internet connection. So tying in other aspects and making it so that we have somewhere that these people who are going to college can go to afterwards, can find a suitable work environment and a career, something that they enjoy doing. So just making sure that those options are available, but also critical thinking. You gotta be able to solve the problems.
So to kind of piggyback on that, Lloyd, so in addition to critical thinking, what skills, never mind. No, okay, critical thinking, period. So connected to that, what skills do you believe were essential in the past or present, but may not necessarily be useful anymore in the future? That's the first part. So let me ask it again. What skills were essential in the past or currently or presently that may not be useful in the future? And then what skills do you think folks are going to need in the future?
Since we were just talking about it, a lot of the mundane tasks are no longer needed. We have automation for that. So those sorts of things are going to be out. What about the future? It's hard to say. We're seeing it right now sort of with the service industry in general, replacement of people with machine tellers and stuff like that. So is that going to be needed? I still think so. There's always a human element to everything. It doesn't matter where it's at. You know, you may pick up a phone and get a robot, but the first thing you go is, hey, I want to talk to a real person. 0000, come on, you know, get me in, right? So there's still that human. We need to be able to connect and understand people still. But skills going forward, that's a hard one because I don't know how far tech will go yet. Like there's all these ideas of what could go on. Definitely machine learning is a big thing right now. We say that quite often. Quantum computing is really big in order to make it so that the next chipset is going to be a little bit better and a little bit better. So people to understand these technologies is going to be something massive. Personally, I also enjoy entertainment. I'm sure we all do. So anything with a new fun twist. Full immersion entertainment like VR would be great. Being able to get that 4D sense now instead of just like air underneath the seat at the theater, you know, whatever they do there. Having that full feel, that full dive, real sci-fi. But yeah, I have a feeling though that even archaic skills will always have a place. Tracking that history, understanding where we started from to get to here, is always something that we'll want to follow.
Thank you. Skills that were essential in the past or present that may not be useful anymore, and skills that we will need in the future.
So hot take, sorry everybody. Students don't need cursive. I know, I'm sorry y'all. But what students do need is to understand what that signature means, even if it's no longer an actual literal John Hancock. And so the ideas behind it don't change, but what changes is how we have to meet the student and then how we have to translate what the significance of that act is. So those are things that aren't really different, I guess, but they're skills that I echo what Lloyd just said. Humans are humans, and as creative and talented as we are, those things that we have don't go away. It's just the format that we deliver it and how we meet them.
You all were both all over my notes. So along with cursive, I was going to say penmanship. You type everything except for, again, the signature. And I think if there's a skill that's going to be needed, I'm going to say strategic thinking. You're going to have to know how to strategically think and have cultural understanding. We're going to definitely need to be more aware of other cultures.
So let's talk a little bit about something you think we're currently using that's going to become obsolete in the near future.
It's going to sound weird. Mice and keyboards. The way that we interface with objects right now is always changing. Think back when machines filled an entire room. How did you interface with that machine? It was a punch card in most cases, right? You'd input, output. The input right now is usually going to be tactile in some form because it works best. It's fast. But people have started to move to touch screens. They're using that. And then now we have voice. So I can activate my phone, tell it to play something, do whatever. Dictation has become good enough that it can pick up on that as well. So how much longer until we have thought? How much longer until I can just blink, turn something on or off, right? Like that's already there in some cases. I think that's the next step, is the way that we interface with the objects that we're already working with today. It will change how we interact with the world around us a little bit more. And it's just a little bit more crazy to think about, but also makes it easier because, God, I'd love to be able to turn off the lights with a simple, like, hey, and they go off. That'd be great.
Lord, you're so calm, but you also make me nervous. I just want you to know that. Like, what world am I going into?
I mean, I'm ready to do the full upload. Just put me in the Matrix. It'd be fine. No.
Something that we're currently using that will become obsolete in the near future.
Print college textbooks. We're still using those. They're going away. I bought a book to support someone, but I also bought the audiobook and I also bought the ebook because I'm never gonna like open the book. I just bought it because I want to put it on my shelf. So books, I think just in general, they're gonna go away. And I know that on my commute in and my commute home, I'm gonna listen to the book. So I would say that, and then I'm gonna say house keys. I bought a house last year, and I have yet to use the house key because we enter the code and I go through the garage. So yeah, house keys. We're not gonna be. I'm always locking myself out of my office. Kentry knows this. I always forget to flick the tab, so I either have to go to facilities at 7 in the morning to try to get into my office, or I'm like, Kentry, hey, do you have a key? So there's gonna come a point in time, guys, where I'm gonna go open, and it's gonna open.
So I'm gonna say, with following up my previous response about if we don't have, handwriting anymore, then faculty members are not gonna have a need anymore because we can't do it, or we won't be able to do it with our chalkboards and our dry erase boards. So we'll have to have some sort of, I would love to be able to, so if you can just, go ahead and get on that, that'd be awesome. Be able to dictate what I'm saying and it just writes nice and pretty on some sort of pretty screen. So that's the thing I think we won't have anymore.
So I'd like to ask, how do you think that we can keep our employees abreast of the time when it comes to the information age and the digital age? And then I'll follow back up with, and how do we prepare students as they get ready to graduate and go into the workforce in the world?
I'm not entirely sure about employees, but it's similar to what I do already. It's going to be a training of some sort. You have to get them hands-on with the tech. You have to not fully immerse them, but dip their toes in the water, show them what's going to be available, whether that be through gradual rollout or some form of like what we do at the lab, where not everyone has the funds to purchase the equipment that we have, and that's understandable, especially for like someone who's just a hobbyist at home. They don't want to drop $2+ grand on something. So making it available to them through resources, through places like us, through your higher learning, you have access to those tools. Through the library, you have access to these things. So giving them access to it and then training them on it so they understand its operation and then can use it themselves later, whether that be in a career or elsewhere. And with employees, it's going to be something similar. You have to dip them in, show them, hey, this is what's coming out, this is what we're going to be moving to, or it's an option. Keep aware of it, but this is how it works. This is how we want to move forward a little bit. That's how I usually see it, and what I usually try and do through any of the orientations or classes that I teach for anyone that comes through the library.
I'm going to say that it's in the reverse. I think that we have to understand the cadence of our students. I don't think that we'll ever be more advanced or be ahead of where they are. They're tapping into things so quickly. I think we have to just really understand their cadence and be on top of that, but also understand that we have to be quick acting, right? So when we discover something, we have to be flexible and be willing to make those adjustments and make them immediately. Another thing we have to just be aware of is that the class that comes in this year, next year they're completely different. So when we're planning things and we're planning out things, say 2-3 years out, understand that those things may be obsolete or that the mindset of the student has changed in some way. So we just have to really understand their cadence and be on top of that so that we can then be successful.
And I would just say that I think that it's a human thing, right? For no matter whether we're talking about student or faculty or whatever, it's just a human thing. If someone comes along and says, here's this cool new thing, and everybody's using it, so you need to use it, well, that's just going to inspire the resistance of like, but the thing I'm doing now is working just fine, and like, who are you to tell me what to do? And so I think part of what has to happen is meeting people where they are and helping people understand and explain, here's how what you're doing now, here's how this impacts this or interacts with this or works together with it. And I think too, that I think for me funny, to follow up on something that you said was, knowing the cadence of your students. So I said earlier, I'm Gen X. There are very few people I will answer the phone for. It is very few. And so, thank you. So someone in the audience saying, yes, okay, yes, not just me, thinking I was antisocial. So, right, so I have had to go through where the common business practice was, like, my mom will never, like, people will try, like, no, just email me the internet. No, I need a phone call and I need a person. And I'm like, oh, like that just is scary to me, Mom. So I don't want to talk on the phone, but we've gone full circle because my experience so far is our young students that are current right now. It blows my mind that, if I call and say, hey, I noticed you weren't in class, and so I'm just calling to follow up, I sent an email. And they'll be like, hey, I just got a missed call and I'm calling you blindly. And I'm like, what? You're doing what? Like, you're calling, you don't know who this is? And then, like, let's have a conversation. And no, like, I don't want the email. I want the person. I want the direct line to that person. It blows me away. And so in some ways, it's kind of like, well, I've gone from pagers to email to... like chat bot, and now we're full circle to like back to the phone. And I don't like the phone, but I gotta adjust because some of y'all like the phone. It's fine. Can do it.
All right, a couple more questions, and then we'll open it up to the audience. So you did not get this one, but I'm going to spring it on you. So I'd like for each of you to share one thing you're excited about as it relates to technology, data, or human literacies going forward. So one thing that excites you and one thing you may be worried about.
We'll start with the fear. So just to really set it off, we see it already, data gathering and how it tracks you and the profiles that it creates off of you. It's really quite scary, but it's amazing as well, the detail that you can get in there. That's the biggest fear, is the profiling. But overall, I'm optimistic about the future of technology and everything around it in general. We have this sort of, humanity has this idea that, something bad can always happen. Someone can use something for evil. But overall, we want to see this creation for good, right? So we try and apply these with a moral high point. I want this to be used for this, this, and this. I think that's going to be how it goes further. We'll see that expand a little bit more. Of course, there will always be bad actors, but overall, I think it's amazing where we are going. The things that I love to see is actually, the book talks about robot proofing, but in general, the idea of robots being able to be used for things that we can't do normally, exploration, the hard work tasks that we can't do, seeing that make a better quality of life for us all together, it's super amazing. I want that utopia, but also corporations are scary, man. Like,
Lloyd, love this guy.
I like all things data, but I'm super excited about predictive modeling. It just makes me so excited. Just being able to like take all of this information and then on the back end it says, hey, this is what's going to happen in a roundabout way. I love predictive modeling. One of the things that does make me a little nervous is how data is interpreted. Because I think you can take the data and I call it fuzzy math. You can do the fuzzy math on top of the data and make it say what you want it to say without representing what it really means. So that makes me a little bit nervous because then decisions, what excites me about my role is that I'm able to provide data that inspires decisions, right? So it's those decisions that are made with that fuzzy math that makes me really concerned. So, yeah. But predictive modeling, anyone?
How happy everybody is. Predictive modeling.
We gotta love our data people, y'all.
Absolutely.
For me, the thing that is both the thing that I'm most excited about is also the same thing that's the most scary. And that is, I think that we are at a point in time where folks are discovering their power. I think that folks are discovering like how much they are able to impact things. And the optimist in me is like, hell yeah, y'all, yes, y'all have had, the Glenda, y'all have had the power all along. But the downside is kind of the bad actors of who's going to be kind of molding and shaping how that power is used and for what purposes. And that's, a colleague yesterday told me, like, you have to agree, like, lowest common denominator is always what we're always going to hit our base level. And I was like, yes, some of us, but I also like to believe that there are some of us who aren't. So I guess we'll find out if I'm right or wrong. I don't know which one I'm going to be right or wrong about, but yeah.
All right, so you get $1 million to invest in something. What are you investing it in?
You guys won't see me at work. No, I'm just playing. I'm just kidding. If I had $1 million, I would invest in smart technology. Right now, my phone, it's the craziest thing. So it pops up and tells me that a Starbucks is nearby, and it knows that a Starbucks is nearby, and it knows that I like Starbucks. So it's amazing how that works. But then at some point, there's going to be smart cities, you guys, where there's all this information circulating and it's navigating like in real time. Smart technology. They get all my money.
Smart technology.
For me, it would probably be, if it's personal, it's land, because I'd like to have a little bit of land for a house. Yeah. But if we're going for something actually invest in worthwhile, not just for me, I would definitely want to focus on things that help the betterment of humanity in general. We have the tech. Let's focus on things that can maybe help with people accessing or utilizing things that they couldn't usually do. Maybe it's a defect in some form that we're trying to correct through prosthesis, through technology that can help alleviate these things. The AI is there. It can help guide us a little bit. So if we could focus that a little bit more, I would probably invest a little bit into that. Not Bitcoin. No, not going to mind. Not that.
Well, you're just a great human. I just want you to know that. I'm glad to sit next to you. Dr. Filateo, $1 million.
I'm going to say something tacky because I'm going to say $1 million isn't really a whole lot. And I know everyone is like, but it's really like it's not a whole lot of money. So how I would use that money is in two ways. The first thing would be is I would have a classroom that has all of the lovely smart plugs that all of our students want. So all the devices y'all need, we've got that in the room. And then I would also try to have a little bit of money to give to my ideators. I'm in a dangerous office suite, and we have conversations, and they're conversations that happen quick. They're in the time that it takes someone to heat up their meal at the microwave. And because of the ideators that I have in my room or in my office suite, we come up with these really cool cross-collaborative ideas and multidisciplinary things. And that's just with conversations over literally someone heating up their meal at the microwave. And so I'm like, man, what would we be able to do if we actually had time to like think and like actually have time to be like creative and not in this crunch of like, this is what we could do. So it would be buy a little time for my ideators on campus, and that's just not faculty, but everyone on campus who has the ideas. To see what kind of creative and cool things they can come up with.
All right. It is 3:12. I've got, I could ask another question, but I want to give the audience an opportunity to ask these amazing panelists a question. So any questions that you all would like to ask? Yes. So just to clarify, the question is to the panel, not to clarify, to repeat, the panel's thoughts on the idea that the younger generation is tech savvy.
I have adult children, but I also have a 3-year-old who turns 4 next month. I had to put limits on his iPad. He requests additional time. I didn't know that he knew how to ask me for additional time. I didn't know that he could ask for additional time. But in addition to asking for additional time, he sat there and just kept pushing the buttons until he figured out that the 4-digit code to get more time on his iPad. He's been here before. They spend so much time on their devices. It's just natural for them to, they're just immersed in the technology, and they can't help but be more tech savvy. I'm apparently more tech savvy than I am.
Yeah, so I will not go on my soapbox. I have a struggle with the term digital native because I think that what we're missing is being immersed in something, right? And I completely agree with you. Being immersed in something is very different from being savvy for it and savvy about it, because I know how to do it for the purposes that I want to do it. But now you want me to translate that into something that I don't want to do, like answer this discussion post or answer your homework question. And I don't know how to do it because it doesn't follow the exact same thing. So I do have a strong, I don't like the term digital native. Being immersed doesn't mean being savvy and being able to translate that to different scenarios. And that's what we, as faculty, the joy and the struggle of what we do, where we do it, we're constantly having to adapt to all of the different levels of technological savvy and use and comfort levels. So we get tired and cranky. It's all right.
Overall, I have seen kids come in who still don't know how to upload a file. So it's hard to say that everyone's tech savvy. It depends on the person, but they're definitely more ingrained in it. I grew up with computers, but they were nowhere near the level they are now. I feel like I am bridging a gap between two different gulfs of tech. And overall, I'm trying to keep up with it as much as I can. And while the kids are inundated with the newest that we were working with, they may not have a deeper understanding of how that tech actually works. They can maybe go to a certain thing or download an app or something like that, But to say, okay, so you run into this error, can you find a way to fix it? It depends. It depends on the person. But the critical thinking aspects of understanding this stuff and finding ways to fix these problems helps us guide them on the right path for, being a little bit more actual savvy. But yeah, I've definitely seen it's not everyone, and it may be a biased thing from someone who is a little bit older saying, "Oh, they all know tech all the time." It's not always the case.
Can I add, and I'm asking, do you all think that, I'm sorry, I'm not the moderator, but I just had a question.
My
Do you
job's
all
done.
think that it's selective in that it's based on what they use the most often, right? So yeah, he may not know how to open a file, but he's out here making a lot of money making TikTok videos. I don't know, like,
Depending on what they are working with. So yeah, as you were saying, if it's like, it depends on especially with money making, that so much stuff is now with social media, it's like a big money maker. So making TikToks is where the money's at. The kid may be great at it. Another person like myself, not so much. So
Who wants to see Lloyd make a TikTok video, though, by show of hands, right?
slight plug, there are some Instagram posts out there with me in them. You can see them through our Instagram, Tomball Library.
Nice. Other questions? Yes. All right, just to repeat, where do you see liberal arts education merging with technology, and how does it fit in with technology?
Well, I'm biased as being one of those disciplines that people are like, that's not like a requirement course. And so therefore I'm not going to take it. And for me, I'm like, when I talk about like the power that people have, I think part of what that power is also folks kind of reminding people, rethinking education. And I think right now, since it is under attack as somehow being, all of these things that I don't think it is, and reminding folks that, hey, when the robot revolution comes, we're going to have options of how to think creatively and holistically and being able to apply things. And that's not going to come if we all just become chemists. No offense to chemists and balancing chemical equations. We're going to have all of these other parts to it. And we're going to have the lessons in what all of these other disciplines teach us. And regardless of whether or not, so our task, I think, our charge as faculty members will then be to constantly have to reiterate, this is why this class is important. I know you may have heard from someone that it's not important, but I'm gonna try to change your mind on that. And here's how it's connected to what you're doing. Even if you're never going to be, in my case, a sociology major, you're gonna have to get along with other people, and this is where you're gonna start having that practice and foundation. And I think that's the same for any of my colleagues in any of their courses.
And I'm going to say that a lot of the integration is going to come in, a lot of that's going to come from how the student is raised. Because, in our household, it was, but again, it's because my parents didn't have that liberal arts background, right? So it was get a job, because when you go to school, you're going to have to pay for those student loans, and you're going to have to be able to be self-sufficient. So I think that that's going to be a big part of it, is, like you said, reintroducing the importance of having those, because we have to roll that into the AI, because people are going to want to know how to feel and communicate and do all of those things. So it's important. I think it does have a place, but as far as education right now, it's really going to depend on how it's presented to the student, because, like I said, in my household, it was get a degree that's going to pay the bills.
And I'd like to add, I think, we've got to figure out how to make the curriculum come to life. Like, it's got to be relevant to the students. It's got to be applicable. And, that's hard when, your frame of reference is what you've taught for the past 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, or how you've been taught. It's just a matter of thinking about the ways in which you can engage technology, the ways in which you can teach a lesson differently, right? I mean, I've got two small children, an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old. Both of them are at Rose Hill Elementary in the two-way dual language program. So they are, by the time my daughter's in 8th grade, she'll be fluent in Spanish. So to complement that, right, my wife and I have to think differently about how that education for her is supported in our household, kind of to Kawan's point, right? So the trips that we provide for her are different. So now our family has a trip for fun, an educational trip. We're going to DC in a couple of weeks, scheduled appointment for them to visit the White House. Like, I've got just, we're constantly taking them to Mexico, right? So they can practice their language. Like, how do we ensure that what they're learning in the classroom comes to life and they see value in it, right? Monty and Brandon and several others are working on our VR AR lab, right? So for those students who don't have the ability to, study abroad, how do we bring other countries, other continents here for them? How do we take some of the stories that they're read and or stories that they've been told and bring them to life? Or, history looks differently now. How are we able to teach lessons with recent, characters, instead of pulling on folks who we've used for the past 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years. So, we talk about the human literacies, the data literacies, cultural, understanding different cultures. I think all of that stuff has got to come into play to make students interested. Because if I'm just reading the same book that my brother read 15 years ago, all right, let me get this welding job where I can make some money and get out there and do what I do.
I mean, I think you guys all said it much better than I could have ever said it. So, but echoing off of that stuff, you got to find the human element and pull them into it. Make it something that they want to learn about. Tying it together is something that's hard, but I think it's possible. There's always going to be that need for that. As things get easier with robots and AI, that should open up time for those activities, and it should hopefully make them flourish. But that's always it's a personal thing. Sometimes people aren't into that. And so making it interesting, tying it into things that are relevant to what they may be already learning. The active learning section, making it so that something that they learn from one course, you apply to another, maybe through a small project, that tying people together.
Final questions before Monty. So summarize what Monty's asking. So individualized learning, and how can technology support students who learn differently? How do you see that Monty? How can tech support individualized student learning? Did I ask that? Yep. No. All right. How can technology support individualized student learning?
I think it can absolutely assist, and I think it can absolutely help. I think the challenge is always going to be the same, is that as advanced as our technology can get, there still needs to be a translator. And so that's where, and again, right, I think that community college faculty are especially poised. We know the struggles of individualized learning because we have all sorts of students in our classrooms. So I think that with additional resources, I think, and again, part of that has to be the time to be able to think through of how I'm going to best use those resources. I think that can absolutely assist, but I don't think that it ever completely replaces it because it still needs a translator, because it can only it takes you and it helps you, but it takes you so far, at least, and that might be a biased view and maybe an optimistic one, but I'll take it.
All right. Yes. Mm, yeah. Yes. So to summarize that, no, no, I feel I definitely passionate about that. So how do we ensure that through all of the technology that we have available, that we don't lose the human contact, the human touch? I'll chime in really quickly. My father passed away last year, and one of the things that I absolutely regret is not sitting down and taking the time to ask him to tell me what it was like in the Gulf War, or telling me, asking him what it was like to be 18 and enrolling in the military, or tell me what it was like growing up in the Deep South in the 50s, right? So I think it is our responsibility as folks who understand and see the value of human connection to make sure that never goes away, and to not take for granted the knowledge that we have around us, right? So you can read it on an iPad all day, every day, right? But there's something different when my daughter sits down and asks my grandma or asks my mom how she met my dad, right? And hearing that story. So I would just offer that as a charge for all of us, right? To ensure that we never, ever let that human connection go away. Because I think it's easy to take it for granted. We can Google what was it like in the Gulf War, right? Or how hard was it growing up as a young black man in the 50s in Opelika, Alabama? Well, I'm sure somebody wrote a blog post about that, right? But it hits a little differently when it's somebody that you know.
So because things change doesn't mean they're bad. So I didn't learn things the way my mom learned them, right? So I don't necessarily think that the transition is bad. I do think that we have a responsibility, as you said, we have a responsibility to ensure that our children, are having conversations. But then I also just want to say, I really think technology is in a place right now where, as we talked about social media and TikTok and how people are making just all of this ridiculous money. But I will also say that that same avenue is being used to save lives when you have conversations about suicide and things like that. So just because it's changing in the way that people can access it, I don't think it's necessarily bad, but I do think we have a responsibility to the people that we touch to make sure that we are having conversations, like real conversations, like I have with Kentry all the time.
I just think that, like, and I'm sorry if I say something that inadvertently offends English folks. But I just think that, like, what is amazing to me is if you take a look at some TikToks, not all TikToks, right? But if you take a look at some TikToks, the amount of information that has to be conveyed, and the story and the plot and the hero and the villain, that all has to be laid out in that 1 minute, 2 minute video, that's pulling from that same, like, right, our classic stories, that there's a reason why these are classic stories, and to make those connections with this classic story is still connected to this modern day version of it, because this classic story ignored this part of the population, and this is connected to how you can make a better TikTok video if that's something that you're interested in, because you still have to be able to convey your thoughts and your ideas, and you have to figure out a way to encapsulate that. So I feel like the format might change, how we do that changes, but you're still having to help students learn how to tell a story and how to tell a good story, whether we're telling that story in a tweet, or whether, who knows what other kind of social media will come up in the future, whatever that medium is, it's still the same structure. And so that's where, and again, maybe I'm being optimistic. Yeah, you're looking at me like, you're done, you're being optimistic. But that's where I think we can work on making those connections for, and not just students, for people to understand this is what education can help you with. We'll see.
So you're a librarian, right? So it's with people like you to help us verify sources, understand what it is that we're looking at, look for bias, look for authenticity, look for all those things. And librarians are great at helping people do that. I know because I work with them all the time. But yeah, that's one thing that we have to try and promote and correct, because yes, there is a lot of misinformation, and it's becoming harder to differentiate what is and isn't real.
Well, but I think we're doing that. And maybe I'm just being optimistic and thinking more of our faculty than other people might. But I know that that's where I can make a connection to. I will rely on my speech faculty. I will rely on my English faculty, and, like, hey, those are the folks who are going to study the powers of arguments and the power of rhetoric and the power of that speech. I'm going to help teach you. I can't teach you all of the research methodology that's possible on the information, but in this little bit, what I am going to cover is, like, biased sources and how that is different from a research article versus from a Wikipedia page. And so I can't say I'm going to take responsibility for all of it, but what I'm hoping for is that when those folks are in their classes saying, all right, you learned a little bit about this in psychology or sociology, I'm going to add this to it, so that at the end, you're going to have all of these different tools for you for it, and it's not on any one thing. And I think that's where that interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary perspective really helps out. Again, I could be completely naive and optimistic, but that's okay.
I'm also fascinated to see, this is purely anecdotal. I'm just thinking about Jackie Thomas as a parent, right? And what it is that I'm trying to make sure that my children understand and know. And this is, no knock on Gen X. So I'm a millennial. Um, and I think that we now, because of all the things that are happening with technology, with data, with information literacy. Verifying the information is accurate. Like the conversations that I have with my children now, it's almost like I'm taking them back to when I grew up, right? So like the music that my kids listen to, it is what I listen to, right? So there's like a gap of 15 or 20 years of music that my kids are gonna be like, who the hell is 21 Savage, right? They can tell you who Notorious B.I.G. is, though, right? Because that's what Dad listens to.
Raising them right.
Huh?
You raising them right.
Thank you. But I also think it because of these conversations now, I'm even more aware of how important it is for them to fact check, right? So like I'm having conversations more with them like, hey, listen, don't take the first thing somebody tells you as the gospel, right? Like you've got to be able to find out information on your own and hear the ways that you do that. So I'll be interested to see, like in the next 10 or 15 years, as our generation of kids are growing up and we are now saying, dang, here's some of the things that work really well in the past that we're trying to make sure stays and is maintained with our kids, that you may see another generation come up of kids who are like, yeah, look, that's not true, or that doesn't make sense, or I've got to verify that, because we're hearing it now all the time, right? So we've got the opportunity to insert that intervention and say, all right, here's what we can do as parents a little differently to ensure that you make sure you fact check, that you do have a better solid understanding of different cultures and different people. So not to gas up millennials, right? Because I do think we get a bad rap. I would really be interested to see 10, 15 years from now, when our kids are older, how they insert themselves in the world and contribute.
How do we know? Like, how do we know what was changed before us that we are literally writing off as the gospel? We don't know, right? So I think it's having those historians. My husband's a history buff. I'm going to share this conversation with him, and I'm going to listen to him rant for an hour. We don't know, right? So we have to just rely on the education that we receive and trust the educators that are sharing the information with us. Trust the conversations that we're having with our children, that we're having with our parents, that we're having with, those that we have access to, and hoping that we come out on better for it on the other side. So I have a responsibility to study in a way that ensures what I'm taking in is from a reliable source. That's my personal responsibility, right? So we have to share that. Like, you can't be out here on Wikipedia, even though I do go, because some of them are really interesting. I wouldn't quote it as a source, right? But some kids don't know not to do that. So, we have to just make sure that we're teaching them how to research effectively.
And I think when we talk about, I think you're talking about a massive overhaul of a system that's been around for a really long time. And I'm not quite sure that we will see that, right? I don't know if there will be a day where there will not be somebody responsible for educating somebody else, right? Because then you take away, you don't have teachers, you don't have physicians, you don't have pastors. Like, I don't know if we'll ever get to a place where everything's going to be solely automated. So, and that's just my opinion, right? Um, sure, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, right.
With all due respect, it's not. I don't see how that. I mean, other than the modality of that, how different truly is that from where we are right now today, right? Because as an educator, right, I mean, that's part of what the big scare is that I'm the one that's controlling the material and the information and the way it's being presented. Now for me, right, I am being guided by this governing body that says this is what you have to cover in these specific courses. And so that's because the folks that are in those positions of power are deciding that this is what the student learning outcomes should be. So I think what I'm suggesting is that there's always a fear of who is shaping the information, and it's no different than the digital content, other than there has to be a bigger um, level of training for the discernment of individual people and an individual awareness of how there is individual responsibility. You can't rely on just because it's on the internet, it's true. Because I could go and put out whatever I wanted on the internet.
I literally am sitting here hearing my grandmother talk to me. So, what's funny is if you've ever gone to church and heard a sermon, um, Genesis 1 and 1 can be translated 65 million different ways. And what I always heard my grandmother say was, baby girl, you got to read it for yourself. Right? So, even when I'm in a classroom and I have someone teaching it to me, doesn't mean that's necessarily the translation or the history behind it. We have to read it for ourselves, right? And we have to, as you said, research and really get an understanding for ourselves. I think that it's important that we have educators. I think that's, you teach us how to critically think. It's important. But when it's all said and done, I had to read the story for myself in order to write the essay that was required.
Yeah, but so my kids still read paper books. So my context is a little different, right? Because unless their kids aren't going to read paper books. Like, we went to the library last week to go check out books for them to read. So, and we've not gotten to a place yet where I'm expecting or even having them read books online digitally, because that's how I was raised, right? That's been the experience that I've had. And I, yeah, no, it's okay, yeah.
What I'm saying is, like, with those changes in generation, the people change as well. So the ideologies are going to change.
Yeah.
Like, what you believe in now is not going to be the same that someone with it growing up with this technology, they're not going to have the same ideology as, like, you know
Yeah,
what I'm saying?
I absolutely know what you're saying. I do think, though, that the benefit that we have right now is that we are, so think about you, right? At some point, you will be you're talking about education. I'm going to make an assumption you're going to teach, right? At some point, you will graduate and start teaching. And then you will be a principal, assistant principal, and then a principal, and then a superintendent, right? So unless, as you progress in your career and your ideologies shift so drastically that those things that were fundamental to who you are as a person don't matter anymore, you see the extent to which you can still influence change in your role, right? So, like, as the chief strategist, I have an ability and an opportunity to influence change, and that is informed by how I grew up, how I taught. It influences how I lead, how I parent, how I spouse. So give yourself credit, right? And give your peers credit for what you've learned and your ability to dictate how our world is going to be, right? Because as it sounds now, those things that are important to you go away over time, and they shouldn't, right? Because they're etched into who you are as a person. You will learn how to adapt and adjust to technology, but still bring with you, as you lead and as you learn and as you teach, those things that were so important to shape who you are. All right. Great conversation. Give our panel a round of applause. We clearly can't solve, as you can tell, we can't solve all the problems here, but this is, I don't want to speak for Kentry, but this type of dialogue is exactly why we have a research innovation center, right? Is to put us in spaces to feel comfortable, to feel confident talking about these things and identifying solutions, right? Or ways that we can support each other, engage our communities in these discussions to make this world, this place that we all believe in, a better place. So thank you all. Thank you for attending, Kentry, Isabel. Thank you for hosting, Terry, for sending some money our way. But this is the first of many. So again, want to congratulate Isabel. I'm making a executive decision, but if you've got any other ideas or topics that you think would be helpful for us to discuss in this fireside chat format, please get those over to Isabel. I was so excited about this experience and look forward to us continuing them. So again, kudos to the panel, exceptional job. Thank you for our guests. Kentry, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Thomas. Y'all give him a round of applause because he's a great moderator. Excellent. Keep the conversation going, and everything that he said is exactly true. I wasn't sure when we said we were doing a fireside chat that was just going to be a one-time thing. Dr. Thomas, we need to do this all often. We need to do this, talk it out a lot, and this was like perfect. And so now I'm really excited about what the next one is going to be. So I hope you all look out for it and come to it and see what the next. We're just going to just keep building on these conversations, and we won't be able to solve all the problems, but we might solve something here. So thank y'all. We have some gifts for our panelists for agreeing to do our very first one. And so, Isabel, if you can give it to them. And just want to thank y'all again very much. And the future, if you want to come back, hopefully you will want to come back and talk to us again. We'll have some external guests. They'll come in and bring some areas of expertise from outside of Lone Star. We have Bruce Hildegeist here in the room with us. We're so happy that you came and listened. He was here, so I'll be reaching out to him, too, about some people in the community that we can bring into our space and continue these conversations. So it's going to be a collaborated effort between faculty, staff, and we're going to have some students. So thank you to students, Phi Theta Kappa, for being here and being in this conversation. We really appreciate that. And I am sorry we're past time, but that just shows that this was good. So thank y'all very much. See y'all next time.